Okay, so a lot of you are at the point where you are ready to make your own Blackout poem using text from an actual book. Now, every teacher is going to approach this a little bit differently, so make sure you listen to what books your teacher has available for this. In my room, I have a box that's labeled BOP, stands for Blackout Poetry, and then the books that you can tear pages out of, which I know is not a normal occurrence, say BOP on them. So you need to be very careful. We're not just pulling books from around the room. We don't recommend going home and picking a book and just tearing pages out of it. Books kind of get ruined if you tear pages. The only books you can use are the ones that say BOP. So, and that stands for Blackout Poetry. But again, listen and follow the directions from your teacher because they might have a little bit of a different routine for that. So when you get to this one, your first job is you simply have to find a page in the book that you want to use for your Blackout poem. It doesn't really matter. This is not the time to get super picky, and really any page will work. I'm taking a page out of Among the Imposters. This is one of my favorite book series of all time. And so I chose this one. So really you just find a page that you want. When you tear it out, you have to be somewhat careful, kind of tear down and away so the page does not tear because we don't want to waste. So once you have this, you don't need this anymore. Return it to wherever you got it so someone else can use it. So you just have your page, and this is where it takes time because the poem that you create, number one, it has to be read top to bottom, left to right, just like any other poem. Number two, it has to make sense. It can't just be a bunch of random words that don't come together in a poem that makes sense. So I recommend when you first do Blackout poetry, starting with a pencil. And maybe lightly tracing around words that you think you might want. But what you might find is you get down, maybe halfway down the page, and you're like, oh, I think I'm going in a different direction. Start with pencil, so then you have the option to erase. So right away when I see this page, I like the word wrecked. So I'm just going to lightly box around the word wrecked because I'm thinking, you know what, I'm probably going to want to keep that word. And wrecked might be kind of the direction of my poem. So I'm just going to skim. I like back home. And Blackout poems are sometimes kind of accidental. They just emerge and grow as you go down the page. So I like back home when his family still raised hogs. There have been a couple of times. I like escaped. So I'm going to keep escaped. I like furious over the damage. So my poem so far would be wrecked, back home, escaped, furious over the damage. And you start to see this poem has a little bit of a suspenseful mood. Don't really know what it's going to be about yet. This kind of damage, again, I'm kind of going through. Now, the other thing you can do in Blackout poetry is if, let's say you want the word wood, but not woods, you can simply box wood, and then when it comes to blacking out, just get rid of the S. You can even go as far as using just, we'll take a sec, there's an announcement, no big deal. Okay, so you could even do this. Let's say you need the word the. So you can go through and find a T and an H and an E and make the word the black out everything else. So in Blackout poetry, you can create and find words. The only key is it still has to be read top to bottom, left to right. So I'm going to keep going. So let's say my poem, I'd gone all the way to the bottom. And I've decided, I for sure know I want this part here. I'm going to then make it final by taking a thin marker. So again, your teacher will have either you'll use your own marker or some procedure for using a marker. So first I'm gonna box around the words that I want, because I want to make sure when I get my marker to black out, I don't accidentally black out any part of the words that I want. So I'm just going to make sure that these words, and again, you don't have to do groups of words like I did. You can do single words that when you read them separately add up. But once I have, there's my poem, now I have to get rid of, and I might actually go back and just get rid of any of my erasing. This is then when I take a thicker marker, Sharpies work, Crayola markers work, they tend to not be quite as black. This is also when you may want to put another sheet of paper underneath here. These tend to be, book pages tend to be very thin. So what's going to happen is you're going to go Sharpie and then, there's going to be Sharpie on the desk. So I would get another piece of paper, which I don't have, so I'm just going to do it on my book, but put something underneath your page that you don't care about. I wouldn't recommend putting a book, it's all I have, but put another piece of paper, get a piece of scratch paper, something so your Sharpie does not go on to whatever surface is underneath. So then what I like to do is I like to give myself kind of a border around my poem, because I'm going to black out all the way to that edge. And then I'm going to get rid of everything else except the words that I kept. And when you get to going around the words that you kept, be careful. You want to make sure that you cover up your black line, but you don't lose that word. And then you're blacking out everything else that you don't need, don't want. And again, I'm just going to go making sure I'm very careful when I go around the parts that I want to keep, because you don't want to accidentally go over the E and then you've lost that part. I'm going to kind of go around and get all the parts in. And yeah, Sharpies are smelly. Hopefully you're not having to do this for too long or take breaks if your poem is huge. And you're just going to keep going around until you've blacked out everything you don't want except what you do want, which is what you've already boxed. So you're going to want to, I'm not going to keep going, but you're going to keep going and black out all the way to your edges. You really shouldn't see any of the book page except in what you kept. So my poem ends up wrecked, back home, escaped, furious over the damage, this kind of damage. Again, if I had kept going, it maybe could have been a longer poem. We really do want you to use the entire page. I just did this short for an example. But then when you're done, there's directions in the station to frame it with a piece of paper and then place it in your interactive notebook. So again, you'll want to choose a page, use a pencil first, create your poem, go around each word in a thin marker, and then with your Sharpie, go ahead and black out. And that's Blackout Poetry.